Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone. I am Rabbi Jenny Greenspan for Congregation Beth-El here in Indianapolis, and it is time for our Shabbat morning Torah Talk. As usual, if you are joining us and would like to follow along with me in the Chumash, if you have read Etz Chaim Chumash at home, you can pull it out. If you would like a download of the PDF, just head over to bez613.org and navigate to our virtual Shabbat resources and scroll down to Torah Talk resources, where you will be able to get a PDF of this week's Torah portion. If you are joining me in a physical copy of the Etz Chaim Chumash, we are in Parashat Ki Tavo, and I will be focusing on Deuteronomy chapter 29 today, which is the very end of the Torah portion and is found on page 1158 in the Etz Chaim Chumash, whether you're looking at the book or at a PDF of it. And if you are using a different Chumash, Deuteronomy chapter 29, I'll be going verses 1 through 5. So you'll be able to find that just by navigating Deuteronomy chapter 29, and we'll start with verse 1. For now, Shabbat Shalom. Good morning to everybody joining us so far. I see Miles Siegel and Alan Hamburger. I see Phyllis Luger and Marty Lip and Margot May. Shabbat Shalom. So good to see you all this morning. It is a pleasure to see everyone each week. Shabbat Shalom. Good morning to Mickey Ashworth. And we will go ahead and get started. So as I said, this is the parasha called Ki Tavo, when you come. It's kind of a contrast to last week's Torah portion's name of when you go out. This is when you come, when you come in. And we actually will have a note somewhere in this Torah portion of that may you be blessed in your coming and in your going, and that you're constantly moving and being blessed as you come and go. And so it's a nice little pairing of the two Torah portions. Last week we saw lots and lots and lots of commandments. I believe 74. I looked it up. I know last week I said about 70. There were 74 mitzvot, 74 commandments in the traditional sense offered in last week's Torah portion. This week we, instead of getting more of a list of commandments, we instead get consequences for following them or not following them. Much of this week's Torah portion contains what is sometimes called the tochecha, the rebukes. Is a collection of the kinds of blessings that the Israelites should expect if they follow God's laws strictly, and the kinds of curses they should expect if they do not. There's a very dramatic scene. We have two mountains forming a valley in between, and half of the tribes are to stand on top of one mountain shouting the blessings, and half on the other mountain shouting the curses, and back and forth into this valley where the priests are seated at the bottom. It's a very dramatic scene, and I think it actually keys us into a little bit about society. So I think for us today, it is actually not about the specific blessings or curses for specific actions in Judaism. Today, for many of us, the mitzvot are a way to guide our lives and to create a Jewish lifestyle. But they are less, for many of us, certainly many of us at Beth-El, they're more about that than they are about hoping that God will bless or curse us accordingly, or rather hoping for blessings, but rather a recognition of creating our own blessings, which is part of where I want to focus this morning. Is here in chapter 29, we have this opening of blessings and a little bit of miracles, which is what I'd like to look at. So we're going to see opening chapter 29. Moses summoned all of Israel and said to them, and this is Moses calling for his last speech of the book of Deuteronomy. This is the beginning of it. It will continue into next week's Torah portion. Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, "You have seen all that God did before your very eyes in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to his courtiers and his whole country. The wondrous feats that you saw with your own eyes, those prodigious signs and marvels. Yet to this day, God has not given you a mind to understand, or eyes to see, or ears to hear. I led you," God says, "through the wilderness 40 years. The clothes on your back did not wear out, nor did the sandals on your feet. You had no bread to eat, and no wine or other intoxicant to drink, that you might know that I, Adonai, am your God." So We have this reminder of 40 years in the desert and of the miracles that God did. And these miracles are sometimes seen as the underline for why we should use the mitzvot to guide our lives and why we should follow God's ways. But I think that the key verse here that I would really like to focus on is on verse 3. To this day, God has not given you a mind to understand, or eyes to see, or ears to hear. After a reminder of the large, dramatic miracles of Exodus and of the smaller miracles of the 40 years of wandering in the desert listed in verse 4, their clothes did not wear out. They never had to replace their clothes or figure out how to make new ones in the desert. The Midrash says their clothes just stayed perfectly fresh, always clean, always whole, no tears, no worn spots. Their shoes stayed perfectly in shape, even with 40 years of constant walking. These are little miracles after the big miracles of Egypt. And then we have verse 4 where it says that God did not give them mind, or literally in the Hebrew heart, though we tend to assume that biblical Hebrew heart and mind, the heart was considered the seat of thinking rather than the seat of emotion in our current parlance. And so we have no mind or heart to understand. We didn't have the eyes to see or the ears to hear. And it points to a human tendency where we will often have miracles around us and not see them, not comprehend them, not notice them, not hear them. And so we just go about our lives and we move forward without noticing the incredible, miraculous world around us. As a child, I remember fondly constantly going to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which was a 6.5-hour drive, if I remember correctly, away from my house. But every 3-day weekend, so it's appropriate Labor Day weekend, this was one of the weekends we might have gone, we would go to one of the best aquariums in the country, if I'm Aquaria in the country. I'm not biased, I promise. It's just my favorite. And it was a moment to see the wonders of creation, a moment to walk through and to look at sea otters and kelp forests and the mysteries of the deep and jellyfish, and to actually see wonders. Because so often we don't notice the wonders around us. We don't notice the beauty of the trees and the grasses. We don't notice just the amount of different kinds of animals around us. And so we sometimes have to trigger it for ourselves, because God didn't just give it to us straight out. We aren't able to live, as Abraham Joshua Heschel called it, in a constant state of radical amazement. It's something that children are much better at than adults are. We are constantly seeing children have a sense of wonder, and we need them to reawaken it in adults. Rabbi Elimelech Bar Shaul, who wrote in the 20th century, looks at this verse and says there's a magnificent teaching here in this verse for all generations and all situations. A person can see wondrous things, true revelations, and yet paradoxically not see them. And so God gives the person eyes and ears, eyes to see and ears to hear, and a heart to understand. But the person must choose to see and hear and understand. It is the person who must open their eyes to all that they see, even when they cannot see it, unless they open their heart to understand what they are seeing. If a person just sees with their eyes, they may react only emotionally, but as long as they do not direct their mind to what they have seen, the emotional reactions will fall short of understanding. We need to work these three together. We need to recognize that God has not given us the ability to constantly see, and yet God has given us the ability to sometimes see. You're used to children looking at the concrete miracles and constantly noticing the wonder around them. And we start to get used to how the world works as adults. We tend to lose a sense of wonder. We tend to use children to help spark it again, which is beautiful. And yet wonder has the potential as we get older to hit us even more deeply when we do experience it, because we let our hearts, our mind hearts, comprehend it. Anything we get too used to can stop being miraculous. For the Israelites in the desert, their clothes never wearing out and their shoes never wearing out, they never really noticed that it was miraculous because it didn't wear out. It was a little miracle. God didn't give them the hearts, the eyes, or the ears to be aware. And so we have to awaken that for ourselves. Right now we are halfway through the month of Elul, the reflective month leading up to the high holidays. And I think we all know that 5780 has been a truly unprecedented year with lots of new lessons. And so I encourage us as we go into our second half of Elul to also look for the miracles and to look for the lessons that we have learned in that year. And as we reflect and try to open our hearts and our minds and our ears to the miracles that have gotten us through this year, how will we hold on to them in the years to come? How will we remember the sense of wonder that we can awaken ourselves to now? How will we remember the miracles that got us through a hard time when, God willing, we have a better time ahead? I invite us to take a walk this Shabbat. Just go outside and find a sense of wonder. Find a sense of something miraculous around you and find a way to hold on to it in the years ahead. Thank you for joining me, and Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. I see I had some others join us. Shabbat Shalom and welcome to Eric Hogan, to my mom. Shabbat Shalom to Cheryl Toof and Carol Steinfeld and Jim Roth. Shabbat Shalom. So good to see you all, and thank you for the vote of confidence on the Monterey Bay Aquarium Trail. Yes. And I do love going to Aquaria every time I visit a new place. It is a wonderful place to spark a sense of wonder. And so this Shabbat, I encourage us to do it even in our own backyards. Shabbat Shalom, and I'll see you soon. We will be on at 10 o'clock on the live stream for the main service.